Welcome to the next gripping episode of Giving Ground, the Warhammer the Old World chat show with me, your host from the far north, Sib. In today's episode, I'm keeping with members of the old Northern Warlords, but this time, my guest is someone who formed part of the backbone of the club rather than grabbed all the trophies, Mr. Dave Harbord. Dave was often the club captain for events where he may not have been walking away with his personal silverware, but certainly helped deliver when it come to the club's trophy cabinet. Dave has been active recently, and we will look at some of the events he now runs and how he's been involved with the old world for longer than most. He's an interesting fellow for sure, and this is no doubt going to be my longest episode because Dave is a talker too. Before I bring Dave into the studio, can I please ask for 2 seconds of your time and 2 mouse clicks? 1, to like the video, and 2, to subscribe so you don't miss any of the amazing guests I've got lined up. Also, feel free to use the Buy Me a Coffee link in the banner below. You could be the first and get an honourable mention. However, I do prefer comments and engagement, and thanks to those who've done that so far. But enough waffle, let's get Dave in and start the chat, or this one will never end. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just not in the middle of the camera again. I don't seem to ever be able to get in the middle of this camera, but introducing today, Mr. Dave Harbord. Dave, welcome to the show, and tell me a little bit about yourself.
Oh, thanks for inviting us, Sib.
You're
Been many years now. Nice to be back. Nice to see lots of people coming back and talking and getting back together. I think probably certainly in the context of what we're talking about, I would introduce myself as one of the very early members of the Northern Warlords, going all the way back to sort of the starting days of the late 90s and then the decade that followed. In my professional life, I'm a teacher. Spend my time educating the teenagers of the world. Got a young daughter these days, older, wiser, giant beard, and much less hair than I ever used to have. But mainly just a war gamer for what is coming up now on the best part, over 30 years.
definitely.
I think I just turned 45, and I think in anticipation of some of the questions, watching Keith's episode the other week, I was having to think back to when it was that I got hooked, and over 30 years now.
Yeah, I mean, so you are probably the same age as Keith.
Bang on the same, yeah.
Yeah, it worries us sometimes that I've known you from we were I was in my 20s, you might have been even possibly
Teens.
your teens.
Yeah.
And I know you were a warlord before I joined. I think you were one of the originals. Yeah, it's a lot of years, Dave. And I know me and yourself, we actually haven't probably spoken in a face-to-face capacity for well over a decade, I believe.
Oh, well over, yeah. It's something that I know you've touched on before, and it's the wonderful thing about the wargaming community. It does not matter.
Yeah.
I walked into that hall at Toy Soldier, which obviously we're just coming off the back of, and there was new lads that I hadn't met in person, but I'd been on WhatsApp chats with and going on. But then, there was lads in the hall. There was lads playing the 40k tournament down the end who, back in the day, 15 years ago, you'd played a game across the table, and it's a nod and a shake and how you doing, and it never seems to change. That shared interest is incredible, but the sense of community is just magnificent.
Last time I was down at Element, I went to an event. It wasn't a tournament. It was an event that some guys up here run. They call it Gotham to some area. And it's basically an open gaming thing. You play board games, card games, war games, stuff like that. But there's no fixed format. You just go, hey, do you want a game of this? And you play it. I was halfway through that, and I got a tap on the shoulder. I was like, oh, Fraser, God, haven't seen you for ages. He says, oh, well, come here a second. So I got up from the table, went across, and Jeff Porritt was there. And I'm like, wow. I absolutely did not expect on that weekend away to bump into the likes of Fraser and Jeff Porritt. So it's amazing that, you can just go somewhere completely random and bump into people that you've known for years.
Yeah. Picking back up exactly where you left off. That's the thing, isn't it? Is there's no awkwardness or anything. You genuinely are just going, oh, hello, what are you playing these days?
Yeah, and you can't be awkward because the things we used to get up to, Dave.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So, you can't be awkward about that. Completely We were a different breed back then.
Scandalous.
Scandals. So, the first question I normally ask people is to tell me about how you got into wargaming. I call it the origin story. It's probably going to get boring down the line because I think most people are pretty much the same. But let's see if you differ from the other people that I've spoke to in how you got into wargaming, Warhammer, and the old world.
I don't think I'm going to differ. I think there's certain significant points for me. Two that stand out in my mind, really. I reckon, and this is, I don't have a good memory. I've been listening to some of the stories and some of the dates and the things that happen, but there was definitely a Christmas sometime around the age of 13 or 14 where I'd asked for the 40k box set.
Oh, no, not 40k.
Yeah. No, this was what I realized was actually the first thing I had was 40k. And it sticks out in my head a little bit because my dad is very traditional, old fashioned, rugged traditionalist,
Yeah.
rugby player, walker, gardener, all that sort of stuff. And I remember, Christmas Day or the day after having put some of these things together up in the loft room at my nan's house in Plymouth. I'd set it all up, and my dad actually came up and let me sort of teach him a little bit how to play this war game, which was unusual for him because very much not in his interests. So I think that was the first moment was having these little figures, the classic old tactical Marines. I can't remember. I think the bad guys in that box set were orcs. I think it was, we're talking 1993, something
Yeah.
like that. And I think you got the old orcs and the classic tactical Marines. But fairly quickly after that, moving on to fantasy, through going into the Games Workshop stores, having somebody in store introduce you to the game, and a couple of mates at school that were into it. There was actually a gaming club at my school. Used to, yeah,
Right.
yeah, it was good. We had an art teacher who moonlighted as a comic book artist. He used to draw some of the stuff for 2000 AD. He was actually,
Cool.
genuinely cool guy. Chris Hidden, his name was.
Right. I used to read a lot of 2000 AZ. I remember the old Zenith's back edition. I love that cover.
Oh well, I'm trying to remember what he drew. So was it the ABC Warriors? Was one of them the mechs, the different? There was a little team of 5 sort of robots and stuff. Anyway, he ran this club, and he would sort of dungeon master a D&D session, but a lot of people would bring board games down with them. Certainly, I remember Hero Quest and Advanced Hero Quest were 2 games that I had,
Cracking games.
and there was.
Warhammer Quest was better.
There was a game, and for the life of me, I cannot remember what it was. And I don't know if it was in partnership with Games Workshop. You had a rollout vinyl hex-based map that must have been a 6x4 with hexes. And you had Bretonnian, what were basically early Bretonnian knights, sort of Games Workshop style, that you ranked up onto unit movement trays, and they moved around this map, this hex-based map. And somebody hopefully watching this will be able to tell me what this was. But it was almost like I don't know, a very, very Warhammer light. It was an intro. You were rolling dice. You weren't really measuring. You were stepping around this hex space map. And I remember again getting that, and I think it was that then took me to fantasy and the dice and the tape measures and the more sophisticated version of it. I want to say something like Battle Masters or Battle Quest.
It actually is, Dave, because whereas you remember the Bretonians from it, I think it was the Ogres.
Maybe.
Yeah, but it was MB Games Battle Masters.
That's it, Battle Masters.
Yeah, and it was sponsored, I think, or it was originally done for Games Workshop.
Right.
But it was definitely MB who done it. But yeah, it was. I can't remember the hexagonal tiles, but I definitely remember the movement trays.
Yeah.
I've actually just had a look and found one in Germany on eBay.
I mean, I tell you what, I'm proud of that, Paul. Battle Masters. That was the old brain. I'm amazed that came to mind. But I have very clear memories of going to that D&D club on a Friday night after school, taking that big box down with me, setting it up with a mate, playing for a couple of hours, and that graduated into Warhammer Fantasy. So I think I had an Empire army again. Right. In the day. There was the more I think, when I think back, I was very, very lucky. There was a games club in Macclesfield, the town I lived in. again, a load of nerds turned up on a Thursday night. My mum used to drive me up, drop me off with whatever I was playing. So I played some Magic the Gathering,
Right.
Warhammer, and really that was the world that I got into it all with, but didn't even know tournaments existed. Didn't have a clue. It was all very local, playing with my mates. I was talking to someone a couple of weeks ago, the Magic the Gathering. I know we're really here to talk about Warhammer,
No,
but
no, it's fine. I mean, if a little bit of sideways movement.
I had a shared collection, a joint collection with a mate of mine.
Yeah.
And we're talking here, Magic at the first edition stuff. This was, I was again getting into it in the mid 90s.
Black Lotuses and stuff. Power 9.
Don't ever remember having a Black Lotus, but 100% had a, Serra Angel, Mox Emerald, Mox Jade, load of the Jewel Lands, all this stuff. No, no, because they weren't back then. It was just they were a rare card, but they were a card people had. Anyway, this mate of mine a year or two later moved away. He moved down south with his family, and he took the collection with him. So this good few thousand cards, and who cares? You're 15 years old. You don't even think about it. Anyway, 3 or 4 years ago, I was doing some War Machine with a lad called Jason Enos. Enos,
Yeah.
Jace.
Yeah.
He I can't think what he said. It was something to do with he was maybe a bit short of cash that month. So what are you doing about it, Jace? He said, I'm just going to sell a couple of Magic cards. I said, you what? He said, he kept collection from the day. So he literally walked into his gaming room, which was an absolute mecca. He had everything. Pulled a binder off the shelf, picked out 2 cards, went, there's $1,000, and walked off down to Fanboy 3. Myself,
It's not a joke, Dave. I've got a mate, John Kello, who used to run kiosk games in Gateshead. Cracking bloke, except he's Scottish. But yeah, he lives in Aberdeen these days and lives off selling his Magic collection. And it's amazing how that cardboard crack is worth so much.
Oh, it's crazy. I had a very fun time out at Gen Con a few years ago, just walking around the Magic sellers, and watching some of the deals going on for thousands and thousands of dollars. But yeah, if he's ever watching, I think it was Nick Mann was his name. If Nick somehow comes across this on the internet 34 years later,
He owes you a shitload of money.
it does, because he walked away with a Magic the Gathering collection that nowadays would be worth a huge amount. Coming back from that long aside, that was the introduction. So it wasn't just Warhammer, it was the board games, it was a little bit of D&D, it was comics, it was Magic the Gathering, it was all that sort of stuff. And that was it was just a fun hobby for a bit of a nerdy lad. The Warlords and the tournament stuff is very, very clear, because that was, I think, day one of uni at Southampton. Turned up, 18-year-old, pretty callow youth, not really very wise to the ways of the world. Living in what was called L Block, in a campus called the Glen Eyre campus. And obviously I'd gone, whatever it is, must be 350 miles south from Macclesfield down to Southampton, on a corridor with about 20 rooms on it, a U-shaped corridor. And the only other northerner there, who was more northern than I was Kev Horseman, Max, as he is usually referred to.
Didn't wear his orange pants day one, did he?
He didn't have the orange pants on, and it was a much more svelte figure in those early days. He was playing rugby. He'd been playing for Hartlepool. He was playing for the Navy team, and we just hit it off immediately. The two northerners on the corridor, we did have stuff in common. And that very first night, I think somehow we got round to Warhammer. Possibly he'd actually even bought some with him. I think he was going to, or he'd either gone to or was going to a very early grand tournament. He had wood elves at the time, if you can believe that.
What else he couldn't possibly have had?
He did, because it was the old 2d6 plus 2 impact hits on the chariots, that sort of thing. So he had a pretty filthy wood elf army. And we got talking, and he said, well, you should play, you should get into it. I'm part of this club. So I'm not quite an original member. I think the founding Northern Warlords, I think, did you ever know Arthur?
Yes, I still speak to Arthur. I've still got him on Facebook.
Brilliant. You've got Arthur, you've got Brendan,
yeah,
you've got Jeff, you've got Max. I think Dom would be in that.
Right.
possibly even Glyn as an incredibly, 11, 12-year-old.
Glenn must have been still a sperm or something by that time.
It was, is it? So
But there was another old one. Was it Ken?
Ken, yeah. Ken Pierce? Yeah,
Yes.
Ken Pierce.
Overwab player though, wasn't he? One more
Was.
historicals.
Played Beastman Fantasy.
Right.
Beat me a couple of times handily with them. Was a good player, really
Yeah.
good player. So yeah, so I think I probably count as second wave Northern
Right.
Warlord.
No bother. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's segue then into clubs, teams, and affiliations. And before we start, Dave, I was really nice today, and I've went to Lidl and I've got us some cakes to eat. But I've just realised I can't actually send you yours, so I'm going to have it for you.
Thanks, I really appreciate that. If there was
Yeah.
ever a really warlord thing to do,
It
it's
was that.
oh, look at this really nice thing that I've got here, and you can fuck off if you think you're having any.
Certainly, I mean, the thought was there, and I will enjoy them later on.
Thank you, I appreciate that. You enjoy that cake on me.
What we didn't do with Keith was actually introduce what the Northern Warlords were. So they were a club that was set up physically in Hartlepool.
Yeah.
They used to play in, I cannot remember the name of the place. I remember what it looks like. It was a little scout hut or something, wasn't it? They started off as an actual wargaming club. But as you say, I think a few years later, probably in the same way that we did, learned tournaments were a thing and started to go off and play in tournaments. For me, I don't know if you've ever done this, but I used to play with Rob Casey, and that'll probably put a smile on your face.
Oh, Mr. Yes.
Yeah, John Murphy, Rob Casey, Bones. I used to play with all them. And we used to ring I think it was the sales line at Games Workshop, but they had I can't remember what they were called, but they would give you help on the rules.
Yeah.
Now, we just used to argue all the time, and we would probably, in the course of a game, have to ring the rules line 5 times.
Oh, could you imagine if they had that now? Good Lord.
Oh, I know. The problem is that half the time it was bollocks that you got off them. These were supposed to be the experts, but you got some horrendous things from them.
I remember conversations at tournaments with opponents saying to me, "Oh no, I've rung the rules line. I've asked this one. I've rung Games Workshop.
What were they called? The troll? What was it again?
Yeah, something like that. The rules trolls or something.
Yeah, I can't remember. Please, in chat,
Yeah,
let us know what they were called, the guys who answered the phones. They tried to sell you the stuff, obviously. They were the mail order guys, but they did help with the rules. So one of them, when we were on the phone to them, said, if you're being this competitive, why don't you come to one of our GTs?
Ah,
And I was
okay.
like, all right, yeah, there's tournaments. There's tournaments. Bones was like, well, I know this bunch of guys from Hartlepool, because Bones was good friends with Aaron Scott, you'll remember.
Yeah, I remember Aaron, yeah.
Aaron knew Jeff and stuff like that. So we ended up getting an invite to the Warlords and coming along as Warlords for that first GT.
Yeah. Well, I was trying to piece together because I actually, in my head, I had that the first tournament I did was a Sheffield Slaughter. But I don't think it was. Because if you remember, it was the Sheffield and Mansfield Dragon Slayers.
Yes.
So you had AD and Rob and John Dale and all of those were Dragon Slayers.
Yeah, Pete Scully, Martin Bunt and all them lot.
All of them lot. But then you also had, and his name's going to escape me now, I've got him on Facebook still. I think he's over in America. And I think it was another Pete, little bloke, who was Mansfield. Oh, I might even look him up in a minute just to get his name right. Because I distinctly remember me and Max in my room in Halls painting frantically in September of that first year of uni a Bretonian army. When I was listening to you and Keith the other day, you were saying that I think he said that the Sheffield Slaughter 1999 was the first one, and that was in the January. Now I remember driving to that in the snow, and that wasn't my first one. So there was one sometime in the November of '98, which I think was a Mansfield one,
right?
Because they were both in that direction. That was my actual first tournament with this this Bretonian list that Max had helped me put together, and we'd I think we literally painted in 3 weeks. We took 3 weeks off uni effectively, just didn't go to any lectures, and from scratch. I know you could do it in 3 days, but he was painting the bottom of horses while I was painting the heraldry on the side and all this stuff, and we pulled it together. So went over, and the first room that I stayed in with the Northern Warlords was a room with Arthur and Glyn. So because Glyn was only ever a couple of years younger than us. You know, he was always seen as the baby, but he was only ever a couple of years younger. So I think he was 16. Me and Max were 18. Max might have turned 19 by then because his birthday's a lot earlier in the year. And then obviously Arthur as the old man. And my introduction to the Warlords was Arthur coming out of the shower, having checked into this room, and chasing Glyn in laps around the room. And me just sort of sat there going, "What the hell is going on here?"
Yeah,
As Arthur's just pursuing Glyn in circles around the hotel room we were sharing.
probably wouldn't age well these days, that like, but I don't know.
Oh,
It was good fun. It was all a
I
joke.
was going to say nothing more than just hilarity. As many of the hijinks were. It just reminded me of it. I'm sure we'll come on to this later, but wasn't there an incident with a T-shirt where everyone got the same picture, a glum day for Glyn?
Yes.
Yes. So yeah, that's where the club thing started. And very soon, it was all around that time. I think there was probably a 6 month to a year period where Keith came on board, Mark came on board, I came
Yeah.
on board, and that, like I said, I think that was sort of the second wave of the Warlords.
Yeah, it swelled with Andy Potter, who is now Andy Dalton, Andy Smith. There was a big roster, and it wasn't just Warhammer players either. We had WAB players in the likes of Muslek, and I don't think, did Jerry ever become a Warlord? I know Daz was a WAB player as well.
Yeah, no, Jerry was on the Warlords. I think he had sort of officially joined many years later. Yeah, Jerry became a Warlord at some point. So like you say, you had the WAB crowd, which I think Ken Pearce sort of moved across to from fantasy.
Yeah.
Mark sort of went the other way a little bit. He was a WAB player that came back, that came across into the fantasy circuit more. Jeff back then was really, there were years where he was just WAB, and
Yeah, just historicals.
yeah, as is the way with Jeff Porridge, whether he was fantasy or WAB, it was usually winning it. But yeah, he had his filthy Greek army. He had his nomad horde that inspired the legendary Max chair against a wall incident. So yeah, and then that was it. That from '98 up until what must be the early 2010s, that was life. That it was, as we say, sort of 15, 20. There was one year, must have been just after uni, I think maybe the third year of uni or just after, sometime around 2001, 2002, when me and Max counted up and we did 26 tournaments in a year.
Yeah, I mean, we're certainly pushing I was at some points doing 2 a month.
Yeah.
Just to go back to Max. Max is to blame for my very short stint in 40k. Because that was kind of Max's game. I think he loved 40k more than fantasy. He asked us to paint up I think it was a Black Templars army.
Yeah.
I still don't know very much about 40k, but
I think he's still got that army.
Has he? Christ. He wanted it for a battle report with him and Jeff playing. And I believe, I can't remember if this is correct because some things I think and some things I imagine, but I believe it was the first time I got in White Dwarf.
Yeah, I think him and Jeff have made it in on a couple of occasions. But no, that I'm confident has that army because we must, again, going back God knows how many years, there was an edition of 40k that he persuaded me into getting into.
Yeah.
And he did me a few intro games around at his house where he was running out his Iron Warriors that he won a lot of things with, I think including a GT. And he'd given me, he'd built a pretty good Black Templar list and given me that to play with. And then for a couple of years, I tried 40k. I enjoyed it a little bit. It's never been my game.
Yeah.
War Machine was my sci-fi fix years later.
It was quite handy knowing Rudgy, wasn't it? Because he opened a few doors for us.
Yes, that was it. So, no, we've always, and that might actually lead on to the affiliations, always had those. It's a small community, especially if you've been in it for a long time. So, yeah, clubs and teams. I'm sure we'll mention the club challenge at some point as we're talking. That Northern Warlords never been.
I'll let you direct the conversation, Dave, because I know you've got 2 things that you want to speak about in affiliations. Would you rather close off the Warlords part or come back to it?
you've got, I know there's questions later on, the worst of times, the best of times, those
Yeah.
sorts of things. And I think the best of times that we'll come to later was the Warlords and the Club Challenge. That was glorious. That was, you've talked about it before, the team wargaming, however you do that. Effectively, you go with your club and represent that. And that was very early on for me. I've never been like Keith, Mark, Jeff. I've never been regularly podiuming. The odd third place here or there, I think, is probably as good as I've ever done. Top tens, very, but never taking home the silverware like those guys did.
You were famous for something different, I believe.
It was the I don't know what you'd call it if you were it's the numbers, isn't it? It was the captaining of the club challenge. It was knowing when it was pick your winners, it was picking the right winners each time. When it was the averages, it was picking the jokers, picking the captains round, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I think the 3 in a row that has been mentioned before was definitely the proudest achievement. That took quite a big level of input from the captain, knowing who to pick in what round, knowing what matchups, what players were good against what.
There's obviously viewers who are going to be reminiscent back in the day who were there when we were there. But I think there'll be some viewers who are quite new to this and don't actually understand what the Club Challenge was. Do you want to just answer 2 questions for me? A quick breakdown of what the Club Challenge was. And did you do all 5 wins or did Jeff captain it for 1 or 2 of them?
All mine.
All yours.
All mine.
Captain Monkeyboy took all 5 wins.
All 5. The Club Challenge evolved, and this was the thing. So the first year that I went to a Club Challenge, you had to pick your entries for that round. So you might have had a team of 10 or whatever, and you had to nominate X number of results to count in your team score. Can't remember how many it was. I think it was 4 or 5 around.
So there was 4 or 5 tournaments going on of different systems.
Yes.
And you could enter people into the system, or you could completely leave the system, but you had to do 3, was it, to qualify?
I'm trying to, I don't know. In terms of the systems, you could have people playing in anything, and you could pick anything, effectively. It was when you got to the averages one that you had to have a certain number of players in a system. But originally, you've got your team, you might have 2 players playing the 40k tournament, 3 in the Blood Bowl, which was always a strength of ours, 5 in the fantasy. And in that round, you had a sheet where you just wrote down the names of the results that were counting for you. So you had to have a good knowledge. This is really early. This is like 1999. You had to have a good knowledge of who had a good matchup, who was playing well in all of those systems. And what we did was we basically had a competition. So the first one I went to over the course of the weekend, everyone in the Northern Warlords pretended to be captain. And at the end of that, I was sort of a runaway winner of that. So for the next year, despite being a fairly junior member of the club, I was made captain. And we actually didn't win that one. We came second. So it was a bitter moment going up on stage with John Dale and him taking the trophy, because it was it was usually the Dragon Slayers, the Troll Slayers that were.
As well as the 5 wins, I believe I played in the Club Challenge for about 6 or 7 years. In the years we didn't win, we either come second or third.
Yeah, that was the second place. That I think we're probably in about 2000 here, and then we went on the streak, as it were. So the first year of the streak was still picking winners and actually nominating games.
Yeah.
Conrad realised to a certain extent, or Conrad and Rob Broom realised, that you could a little bit game the system, because the bigger the team you had, the easier it was for you to pick the mismatches, the big imbalances, Yeah. So they went to an averages system. So you simply at the end of the tournament, you were looking at an average of where everybody in your team had finished.
Yeah.
Now the thing with that was most teams were about the same size. The good teams were finishing in the same place. The biggest thing that made the difference on that one was the first round. First game, Saturday morning, was captain's round, and the captain's score counted double in that round. So that was a bit of a you can't lose, which fortunately I never did. And then you also had each round, you had 2 jokers to play.
Yeah.
And your jokers, again, were the thing that made the difference between the scores at the end. So if over the course of a 5-game tournament you played 10 jokers and you got 10 out of 10 right, didn't really matter what your team's average was, you were winning.
Yeah, I mean, I remember a little anecdote here just to slide in. You played me and Tristan back to back, and Rob Lane played himself back to back in them two games. And them two jokers, when me and Tristan won and Rob Lane didn't, won us the club challenge from the Dragon Slayers.
It did. And this was it. It was never about, you look at a team that had Rob Lane, AD Mack, John Dale, Pete Scoley.
Mm-hmm.
That's four very, very, very good war gamers. No, I'm not saying we didn't have Jeff Porritt and Keith and yourself and Mark and Aaron and people like that. But it was never about picking the top players, because the top players have to get after round one, round two. They
Had
had,
matchups.
yeah. The trick was to look in the mid tables.
Yeah.
Where were your mismatches in the mid tables? Who'd had a bad game and lost? Who was going
Yeah,
to?
I mean, there's that classic thing in tournament play of submarine, then isn't there, where you lose the first game and then you come back up because you're better matched or you're a better player than the people who have got some losses. It's an eminent possibility in any tournament for maybe Keith and Jeff to get matched up turn one.
Yeah.
Two players who are probably henpicks to win it. Only one of them can win that game.
Yeah. So it was those were the glory years, and that was I'm pretty sure if we found the old shield wherever it is,
Yeah.
I think it was 01, 02, 03 were the back to backs, and then may have been a gap. There was definitely a point where we, as a club in the mid 2000s, people started to get a bit less active. The other one that sticks out in my mind was were you at the Adelphi Hotel in Liverpool?
Yes.
The comeback at the Adelphi, that was beautiful, because that was many years later. That was, I think, 5 or 6 years later when people had really stopped playing.
Yes, I'm trying to remember a lot because there was two events at the Adelphi. There was one, the Return of the Sib event,
Right.
where they all had the T-shirts done. Yeah, I'm sure there was a club challenge there, wasn't there?
There was a club challenge at the Adelphi. I specifically remember it because when you went back up to your room, quite often you had some business cards tucked under your door, if you recall.
Yeah,
Some enterprising local female businesswomen had offered
yeah.
you an opportunity.
Never took it, never ever.
But it did amuse me. But yeah, that one was that, and I think that was number 5, particularly pleasant because
Yeah,
no one had really been playing for many years, and then it was just I think it was Jeff talked us all back into it. Can't think what he was, probably Blood Bowl at the time, I think, and he said, "Come on, everyone out of retirement for one last hurrah," and came back and managed to walk away with the shield once again. So yeah, that was certainly that. I think that probably wraps up the Northern Warlords stuff for now. Was for me, the tournaments were amazing. I loved every single one of them. Again, down in the cabinet somewhere, I've not been as blessed as Keith and people to be able to be throwing trophies away. I think I've got a couple of honourable mentions for a bit of painting, stuff like that. I was always into that side of the hobby. If I could find where the Club Challenge shield ended up, I'd love to get even just a photo of it, because that was, the
yeah.
proudest moments.
One of my little how can I put this? So I got it engraved the 3 years we won it.
Did you?
Yes, I was the one who took it to the engravers and got the engraving done.
Fantastic.
I didn't do it the years we came second and third, so I actually brought it home in the car with us twice, and I believe I had to pick it up from somebody the third time. I wasn't supposed to get it engraved the third time, but whoever was given the job was being a lazy arsehole and didn't bother getting it done. I believe we were due to go back, and you know how you had to hand it back in?
Yeah.
Yeah, we were going to go back and nobody had bothered getting it engraved, and it was like, it just fell back to me to get it done. Just a stupid little thing I remember from it.
Yeah. No, it was seen again back then probably as the pinnacle of the year. There was the Warhammer Games Workshop GT at
GT,
London, which some games that stick out in my mind from that. I know you've talked about the Keith Jeff Porritt one, which was a classic. There's one I'm going to mention later with Jeff Porritt again, and a Dragon Slayer, which was an absolute classic. The whole year really was when's the club challenge.
Yeah, I used to love three things. Like in every year, I would always have money pigeonholed aside for the GWGT and Heat, the Club Challenge, and the WPS GT.
Yes. Yeah, those were the three. Those were, absolutely sacrosanct. For me as well, we'll maybe talk Toy Soldier a little bit now.
Yeah,
Toy Soldier was always on my birthday. So it was always the big summer tournament. It was there or thereabouts around my birthday in mid-July. So that was my fourth sacrosanct one. Was I had to go up to Toy Soldier. I had to
Yeah.
have a night out in Preston, and all the various shenanigans that went on up there as well. So yeah, so like I say, the third world down there, the affiliations in terms of the tournament scene, and very proud to have brought it back with Mark, not just in the early days being a enthusiastic attendee of Toy Soldier and all the shenanigans that went along with it, including waking up in the what was the pub called? There was
Well, there was two, because the first few Toy Soldiers we went to the one on the right hand side of the road.
and it was the landlady then moved. We
Yes,
followed
the other
the
pub.
landlady, yeah.
Yeah,
Um, because the first one, we drank her bar dry on the Friday night. Do you remember? Her fella had the club in town, and I woke up in there on the Saturday morning. So I'd literally slept in there for my 20-something birthday, and she hadn't
yeah.
woke up in there, and they were refilling the bar because 15, 20 Northern Warlords had drunk the bar dry.
The second bar was better because it had the beer garden.
It was, and then she had that for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
I think was it the Ship In, the first one was called.
Yes, it might have been.
And she said to us that the third year we were there, it was her favourite weekend of the year because you had a load of, I don't know what the term is,
Idiots.
larger men who were notable, I think was the key, who had disposable income, caused no threat to the bar or any of the denizens within it. Spent an absolute fortune. She loved it. It was she said, this is you're paying for my summer holiday every year, just with that tournament weekend. And then
Yeah,
she then moved across the street, and we followed her because she did us every single year. She did us special offers on the beer, if you recall. So there
yeah.
was
Don't talk
always,
about the Apple VK ever.
there we go. There was always, she basically always had the what was going out of date that month special offer for the war gamers, and whatever shite it was, we lapped it up.
I think I mentioned it with in the Keith one, but I just remember going to the bar and she was like, "We've got Apple VK on special, £1 a bottle. Is that £24 a crate? Yeah, two."
I remember it, but it was every year. It was some sort of random shite every year
Yeah.
that she was trying to get shot of, and we absolutely drank it down.
So what I've got here, Dave, I've got some pictures of your goodie bag from Toy Soldier this year.
This is yes. This is the Toy Soldier we've relaunched, the Resurrection. We've brought it back.
Resurrection, yeah. So it was at Element Games rather than its spiritual home of Preston University.
Yep. So we've that's very much my local gaming club now. So I'm less than 10 minutes down the road from it. Mark is half an hour down the motorway in Northwick. It's the place we play in the Northwest, as it were. And they very accommodating. We've all gamed there since Darren had it back in the day, before Element Games even took it over, when it was just the Northwest Gaming
Centre, yeah.
And obvious choice, because it makes running tournaments so easy. The days of having to have a van and have a load of 6x4s stored somewhere in a scout hut, and have all your own terrain, and be hiring the Davy Sports Centre in Sheffield, or
Yeah,
the Working Men's Club or whatever.
Shane alluded to that when we ran the Teesside Tear Up. The logistics was just a nightmare.
Yeah.
So hard to run big events. Small events, not so much, but big events were horrendous to run.
Yeah, and it was always the pack up, to be honest, on the Sunday, when you're absolutely knackered after two full on, not only wargaming, but again back then drinking as well. Nowadays the drinking side of it's a bit less, but back then you were absolutely ruined by 5 o'clock on the Sunday, and then it was a 2 hour pack down. So no, just being able to go into Element for us is great, but you've got Firestorm in Cardiff. You've got many different ones. I think
Yeah, you've got Wheeling Games. You've got
I think there's one down in London. There's the fact that there are these big gaming centres across the country now makes all the difference. So because we weren't putting all the time into the logistics of sorting out the tables, sorting out the terrain, sorting out screens and that, we decided to go for what we've termed the best goodie bag in gaming, which basically gave me a bit of a chance to abuse the 3D printer, which has been my new toy for the last couple of years. We just wanted to make sure, especially because it was 1.5, the errata was out because the match play guide was out, that people could turn up and game without having to bring anything other than their army.
So this is something that's changed a lot for me. When I went to my first Forgotten North Gaming GT, they give out not a goodie bag, but they give out some templates, I think it was. And I do think I like going to the tournaments now and getting your free stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it gives you a reminder of the event, not just like it's a keepsake.
Yeah. Well, that was, and you can see just it's not the best photo I've ever taken there, but we gave out a special feature, Cathay themed special feature, which is essential for one of the match play scenarios.
Yeah.
And it meant we could standardize all of that. The King of the Hill, we've got that green template there is with a cross in the center for the King of the Hill scenario. The tokens at the bottom have got like a little relief of a Chinese dragon on it. So we sort of went with that Cathay theme because they're the latest hot shit from GW, maybe a little bit too hot, and and it gave us a chance to say thank you for people. I think that weirdly the most popular thing that was in that bag was actually the fully printed tournament pack, which in the back of it has got some score sheets that we designed to be able to track the games, because with the match play you do have to track your scoring.
Yeah, it's instead of doing it all at the end, you've got to do the progressive scoring through the turns.
That's it. There is actually quite a lot of admin. Now, I'm a big proponent of scenarios in wargaming. Ever since playing War Machine, which is almost entirely about scenario,
Yeah.
I've come fully over to that. So the match play guide is something that I firmly believe in. It's not 100% right, but I do think it makes the game better. There might be some community tweaks to it. Now it's out in the wild just to get things right. But for this first tournament, we just said as pure as we can. We did want to allow legacy factions. There were an interesting bone of contention in some of the group chats that I'm in, but
Yeah.
they're certainly popular amongst the tournament scene. So yeah, we wanted to allow legacy. Perfectly happy to allow third-party miniatures, but apart from that, we went for straight down the line, pure match play guide, 6-0 system, all of their scoring. The feeling was certainly the stuff we've seen publicly since the tournament wrapped up was they went really, really well. Good test of gaming.
I've played in 3 tournaments since the match play guide came out, and all of them have had a very different feel to them. So I played in one that was very similar to Toy Soldier, where it was a lot of the progressive scoring ones. I played in one that had no progressive scoring, it just had baggage trains and some other wild secondaries. And then I played in one yesterday at Gathering Point Games, really fun little 1-day 3-round tournament. I came second, so I was quite happy with that.
Nice, congratulations.
But that used some of what they call not the surprise ones.
Secondary objectives.
The secondary objectives, but they weren't a surprise. They were named up front.
Yeah, ours were.
That was quite interesting. Not 100% sure where I sit on which ones I prefer. Maybe I prefer a variety.
I had 2 conversations that pointed at the same thing with a lot of the players over the course of the weekend. And you played a bit of War Machine back in the day.
I did, yeah.
And there was a famous axiom in War Machine, which was, because it was all scenario based, you had to have answers to certain things. And one of the questions you were asked was, what are you going to do about Vlad stood on a hill under Blood of Kings with iron flesh on him?
Yeah.
And what that meant was, in the game, forget all of the terminology, you had a caster, which was effectively the king, and if you killed the king, you won, that had stacked a certain number of buffs on himself as to be virtually unkillable. A defense value that was through the roof. In your list, whatever faction you were playing, you had to have an answer. And there were answers to it. You could park a warjack in front of him and then throw another warjack into that, and it would cannon into him and knock him over without you having to make a roll against his defense. There were certain strategies that different lists could put in play. Different feats, different this, different that. And the reason I've gone through that sort of quite long-winded War Machine story is if you turned up to a War Machine tournament and your list didn't have an answer to that question, then you only had yourself to blame.
Yeah.
Because you knew beforehand the scenarios that you were going to be playing, you knew the win conditions, and you could make a choice. You could build a list that went basically, fuck the scenario, I'm playing 5 games of caster kill. And if I don't kill your caster in 5 games, then I lose, and that's the choice that I've made. You could have other lists that were all-rounders. Jamie Perkins, sort of probably the best War Machine player there's ever been, always played for Scenario. Had many years of success with the Cador list. Now, bringing all of that back to Warhammer, this is where my firm belief in scenarios has come from. We published that pack 2 months before the tournament, something like that. The number of players who turned up to our tournament, and we are talking masters level players here. I think somebody went through the top 20 at Toy
Bryn, I think it was.
Yeah, and said I think there was 13 of the top 20 in the UK were playing at Toy Soldier. The number of players who openly admitted they hadn't read the tournament pack. And I laugh because, I get it. The number of players that I had to go round and remind they were playing a breakpoint scenario twice, one game after another.
Keith would be one, would he?
Oh no, Keith remembered he was playing the scenario and then forgot to add on his points for breaking the opponent. His was even worse. He admin errored it and just completely forgot. There was a lot of chat. King of the Hill especially, I think, is probably the most controversial scenario in that book. Oh, there they are, the nice trophies. King of the Hill is very swingy. 100 points at the end of every player turn is huge. And I had a lot of people were coming over, well, you win the roll for first turn, you've won the game. I had the same conversation every time. If you're bringing a list where you haven't thought, right, game 3 is King of the Hill. If my opponent gets first turn and parks up on the hill,
how do I get him off?
What am I going to do about it? Then you've not prepared for the tournament. And if your list doesn't have something, whatever your answer is, doesn't have something to deal with that scenario, then you've not prepared for the tournament. So don't.
Certainly not, no.
Don't come and whinge to me that King of the Hill is a broken scenario, because you can build lists that will play King of the Hill whether they go first or they go second. I absolutely agree. For certain factions, Vampire and TK, King of the Hill is a very favourable scenario. But again, if you know on the top 10 tables, let's say, that there are going to be Vampires and TKs, and you are going to sit down opposite them, and you may well sit down opposite them in King of the Hill, how can you not have thought beforehand, what am I going to do in that situation?
Yeah, Toy Soldier, from everything I've heard, was a big success.
It seems to have been, yeah.
Yeah, just flying through the winners and movers and shakers pictures there. But the feedback I got, I was devastated that I missed it. Came on a working weekend, but the feedback I've heard was it was very, very good, and I'm definitely looking forward to the next one coming up early next year.
I was going to say, we'll plug those dates very quickly, because if anyone does want to reserve a ticket, it's muslek.mark@gmail.com. We're looking at the 28th of February going into the 1st of March. That'll be the one in the early in the year. And then we've got, I think it is the 5th and 6th, or the 6th and 7th, 5th and 6th of September later in the year. We'll be back at Element Games. It'll be exactly the same recipe. We'll keep an eye on what the community has done with comp up till that point, and sort of make our best decisions as to how to keep things nice and fair. And every time I look at all of those pictures now, I think to myself, why couldn't Max have just angled it so the bin wasn't in the shot?
He's a cracker, isn't he?
He is.
So, moving on, we know that you've never played team kind of national teams or anything like that, but I'm going to let you tell us about this. You are part of the reason why Warhammer came back.
That's generous.
Yes.
I'm lucky enough to have been involved with it since the decision was made, I think is the best way to put it. So, yeah, without in any way sounding self-aggrandizing, there is...
Do it. Sound self-aggrandizing.
No, I just have to be a little bit careful, because I have signed one of the Games Workshop NDAs, and those NDAs are pretty vicious. They will take your house.
We've discussed beforehand that I am not going to drive you down any direction or ask you to reveal anything that is in NDA that is currently being that's coming along. Yeah. But luckily, we knew JTY back in the day, again, a War Machine player, and from the Club Challenge and stuff like that. And this is probably how you got into it, is it?
It is, absolutely. And this is, I think, talking about the historical stuff is no problem at all. So for a lot of people, the old world is 18 months old. It's still quite fresh. For for myself and the other members of the playtest team that we're on, it's nearly 6 years old. COVID had quite an impact on its progress and it coming out. So I think it was all the way back in 2019 we were approached to be one of the external playtest teams, and we've been very active in that role. As time has gone on, certain groups have dropped away or haven't been, but we've been very, very active, made as big a contribution as we possibly can to getting the game back. So for me, the old world is coming up on 6 years old now. And one of the problems that I was having was remembering what the current rules are, because there is a big difference between playing Warhammer as a playtester and
Yeah.
playing Warhammer as a tournament gamer. So for many, many years, you're basically doing the latest iteration, but you're not always playing the latest iteration. What you're actually doing is comparing what you've been sent that month with what you were sent the month before, and then feeding back on what's better, what works, what doesn't work, making suggestions as to how things could shift. So you're in a constant state of flux, and
Yeah.
a playtest game might take you 4 or 5 hours, because you'll rewind situations. You'll go, what if we did this? Does it work if you do that? It's a very different type of gaming to what the tournament scene encourages. And then I think probably in the last 6 months, most stuff now locked down. The rules are out and published, the big errata, that's been a big focus for the last year or so. The big mid-season errata is probably the best way to put it.
The
That's out.
Wednesday that changed Warhammer, I called it.
Yes, yeah, that's out there in the world, in the wild. The match play guide, which was something that I was waiting for, is out there in the wild. So I've been able to actually go. There's a lot of stuff here now that is settled. The play test now is going down a different avenue. We're not just establishing the rules and the factions anymore.
I did find it strange how when Games Workshop were first doing their Warhammer the Old World tournaments, they were really kind of hard flogging them as match play. And then obviously it got revealed later on that it was around the whole book and how they were all going to change and how they envisaged unifying events and stuff like that.
Yeah, Games Workshop quite rightly has a much more holistic view than any of us, any of we. I don't know what the right phrase is. Than tournament gamers do. Tournament Warhammer. Let's focus on that system. Is a microcosm of that marketplace. The old world has been hugely successful for them. Almost way beyond their expectations in terms of the money that it has made. It's been a massive success.
Yeah.
Queues out the door on launch day, round the car park. Me and Max were lucky enough to invited down to actually go, and luckily got to sneak in the back door with JTY rather than having to queue up. But it has been a monumental success. And tournament gamers, by their very nature, tend to be quite binary. Something's either good or it's not.
Yeah.
And tend to take quite a narrow view on the game system, and often can find it quite frustrating. The game itself, they've always been very clear. It's a beer and pretzels miniature collecting game. The small group of weirdos that we are, myself included, want to make it into a competitive sport, then we're very welcome to, and they'll give us some support, and luckily some of us can maybe try and help out with that through the playtest and pushing the match play and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But tournament gaming is never going to be any sort of a focus for Games Workshop ever. Because it's not. That's not what they see the company as. That's our choice to make that happen. So that's been an interesting dichotomy almost for me, where I've got those two perspectives on it, and I've shifted from playtest mode, which is very, very different, into tournament mode, where I'm almost reading through books that I was lucky enough to be able to have some input into from a playtest standpoint, and try, as tournament gamers do, trying to break some of the army lists that I had a hand in feeding back on.
I am unsure that I'm very jealous of the fact that you got the chance to do it, or I'm very happy that I didn't have to put all of the effort into it.
I think the biggest misconception is that if you're a playtester, you're in on the ground floor. You've got
Yeah.
some sort of advantage because you've been playing the game for ages before everybody else. It couldn't be further from the truth. If anything, it's a hindrance. So I found myself at Toy Soldier as the TO going round, and I should know these rules backwards, left, right, up, down, 6 years of reading them. But I've read so many different versions.
They
You know,
get confused in your head.
oh, and I think this will be one that this isn't a big reveal or anything because it's now in the rules. But there was an early version of Swift Stride and Charging that's very different to what is in the rule book now. And actually, it was a bit of a last minute change. It was fed back very strongly from a different playtest group, and it made it in. And it wasn't something that I was a part of playtesting. That happens quite commonly. You know, different groups give feedback, and then when you actually see the final printed book, it can be very different to the thing that you were playtesting.
Yeah.
A lot of surprises in there. This was one of them. Even now, 3 years on, somebody will ask me a question about charging, and I will second guess myself because I spent 2 years playing a way that I thought it was going to be locked in as, and then it changed right at the end. And there's plenty of examples of that. So I think if we were to dispel any sort of myths, it would be that playtest in some way gives you a competitive exact. Yeah, it really doesn't.
Right then, Dave, we're going to move on because I tell you what, the clock's flying up.
Sorry, I tend to talk a lot.
No, it's completely all right. So, favorite army?
This will be reasonably quick. There's always been two for me.
Yeah.
You've got the Chaos. I'll always go back to Chaos. Chaos is where I've currently returned to. It's what's on the painting table right now. In fact, 10 minutes before I came upstairs to chat to you, Seb, that was what I was doing. Sat basing Chaos Knights. Really enjoying Khorne at the moment. I like the new Frenzy rules. I think the change to Frenzy has been a good one because Frenzy is so much more controllable these days because you don't have to charge the nearest target. It's much more advantageous. You can't get pulled off in the directions quite as much as you
You've
used
still
to.
got to charge, but you get to
You've
choose.
got to charge, but you get far more freedom in where that is, as long as you can give yourself multiple options. So,
Yeah.
big fan of that. So, I'm working on the Khorne. Up until this point, throughout the playtext, I've had a big soft spot for Orc and Goblins. So, I've got plenty of Orc and Goblins downstairs. I've enjoyed those. But back in the day, it was all about the Dogs of War for me. Big collection of Dogs of War.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask a question, and I'm going to ask you to be very careful how you answer it. But I have heard the next book that's coming out has some kind of hat tip to Dogs of War, in that the way you select your general allows you to different ways of picking your army. A bit like what's come out in the new Cafe one.
Yeah.
They can merge with Empire. There's going to be some new version of that. Now, I don't know if you can...
I can't answer that question. I think, obviously, there are some pretty reliable leaks out there.
Yeah.
I don't think, and I hope I'm not going to get in trouble for this. I think we can be pretty confident that Border Princes is the thing that's coming. I believe that's in fact, that may have even been announced.
Yeah, that's actually in print on the GW website. The fact that the next book is the Cetra one is that and the Border Princes.
Yeah, so Border Princes, you can do some deduction from that. It's Tylea. That's where the Border Princes are.
Yeah.
Tylea is the ancestral home of the mercenaries, of the Dogs of
Where the
War.
dogs come from, yeah.
Thing. And if you look at the history of how the old world has come about, JTY is a student of Warhammer history. He really is. It's like talking to an encyclopedia if you get to chat to the man. He absolutely is paying service to that history. Don't be surprised to see some of the things that were there back in 5th, back in 6th, having a tip of the hat to them in this next one.
Yeah. So you spoiled it a little bit there. I'm going to bring this section in now. What's on the painting table? Because you've kind of just told us.
Yeah, at the moment it's Khorne 8 Chaos. That's the direction I'm heading in. I'm very much enjoying just having a let's go smash them army, which I've never had. So Chaos historically for me was always Zinch or Slanesh. Never really played a Khorne list. So that's where I've headed this time, and I'm enjoying painting.
Grand Army?
Yeah, Grand Army. So nothing. It isn't complex. It's go and smash people in the face with Khorne 8 Knights. Nothing more than that.
I've been having to write as many lists as Ed does on his channel. But mine just all go in the bin afterwards. I was like, yeah, didn't like that one. I've been trying with Heralds, as I say, Heralds of the whatever they're called.
Heralds of Darkness,
Heralds of Darkness, and I've been trying with the Wolves of the Sea. I think the Wolves of the Sea is definitely the better list. I've just been trying ways of maybe moving away from the dragon builds, because now you can't take a dragon. You either take 2 dragons or you take 3 dragons.
I think there is, without revealing any of the super secret tech, because myself and Mr. Muslek are looking to roll out some Chaos this year.
Yeah,
I think there are some very viable builds. Don't get me wrong, I love a single big dragon. You know, the 10 wound Chaos dragon with the Lord on top
yeah,
is a force to behold. He's getting that close order bonus that no other large target does because he's got that 10 wounds.
yeah.
Um, he doesn't need tooling up. He comes with a built-in ward. He rolls on Gaze of the Gods. He does the job. But you can fit a lot of stuff in around that. Manticores are not bad. Manticores, again, fly is an incredibly powerful tool, I think, in Warhammer. Anything that has the fly rule and that mobility is excellent. They have them and Bretonians, I think, have the most smashy power of any lists in the game, and
Yeah.
there's a lot to be said for that. The conversation we had about King of the Hill earlier, certainly Bretonians and Chaos are 2 lists that can go and smash somebody off that hill.
Definitely. The ones I've been looking at, I've actually not been taking the Chaos Lord on the Dragon. I've been looking at the Exalted.
Yep.
Just sucking up the little bit less wounds than the T5 so that you can go back to stacking equipment on them and getting that triple save. In our meta up here, Vile Tides come back strong.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of one of the things I've been trying to do is find a range of different ways to, even though it's taken a bit of a nerf, the Infernal Puppet is an insane magic item, especially in the world of caster values being halved. +1, +2. I know, let's forget the vampires. I know a lot of people can make that +2 or +3. But even then, if you're picking the 2 lowest dice out of 3, there's a lot of the time that those spells aren't going off. So
Yeah.
my direction of travel at the moment is very, very, very light touch on the magic, and very much about putting those points into as many smashy things as you can get. And I think Keith would call it a pressure list. Really getting in people's faces, turn 1, turn 2,
Yeah.
absolutely hammering people before they get a chance to set up the things they're trying to do.
Most certainly. Right. Let's talk about your best game.
There's a couple of them that, again, I've given this a little bit of pre-thought. I'm going to shout out somebody who I think you mentioned last time you might be able to get him on for an interview, and it might sound a little bit obsequious, this, but probably one of my gaming heroes, I think, which is AD McWalter, AD Mac.
Well, I have good news, because of the original 6 people that I tipped up for this when I had the idea. AD Mac has said yes to an interview.
Brilliant. AD Mac, for me, is just a legend of the game. I've never known someone so good at the game and yet such a gentleman.
One of the true gentlemen of Warhammer. I was lucky enough to play him at Durham, our last game, and he said it was like a game of chess. It literally came down to me pushing the game in the last turn that swung what was sitting at a draw for 5 turns into a small win for 80. If I hadn't have pushed it, it probably would have ended a draw. But I thought, it's the last game. Both of us are sitting in about 6th or 7th position, so why not try to go for it?
Yeah. Many, many great gamers out there that I've been lucky enough to know, been lucky enough to regularly play against Keith and Jeff and Max and Mark and all these people. But outside of my close friends, who I play against regularly, I've never had better games of Warhammer than against AD Mac. And they've down the years, there've not been that many of them because he was usually sat up on table 1 and I'd be a bit further down. But on the 2 or 3 occasions that I ever got to play him, there's a very memorable one with my Dogs of War where I'll own up to it many years later. He still beat me. I cheated all the way through with Galloper guns because I'd read the rules wrong and they were not only moving but also shooting.
Right.
And even back in those days, they couldn't move and shoot. And he still spanked me off the table. But it was just an incredible game, just an absolute gentleman. And like I say, one of the best war gamers I think I'll ever come across. So on a personal level, that would be any of the 2 or 3 games from history that I played against AD. I wouldn't want to pick one out of them, but they stand out in my head. Best game I've ever watched, or certainly most enjoyable game that I've ever watched, was the final game of a GWGT. It was the first of Jeff's back-to-back wins.
Right.
And it was top table, final game against John Dale's sort of Savage Orcs, if you recall them.
Yes.
So beautifully painted army, absolutely stunning army. He'd done, I think he'd almost called them stone goblins, as a bit of a justification for the fact that he'd mixed up the best parts of Savage Orcs and Night Goblins and everything else. But he'd made the effort, he'd converted them. As I recall, he certainly had one, if not double giant, I think, pinning his flanks. He had the big unit of frenzied orc boar boys in the middle with a screen of goblins in front of them. And Jeff at the time was running his Slaneshi demons.
Yep.
Yeah, if you recall them, another beautifully painted
Or
army.
he moved over to the vampires.
Yes, before we moved over to the vampires, he had the. I think it came from a souvenir shop somewhere. It was a statue of what a many-armed snake lady that he'd got out of a store on holiday, had sprayed up and painted as a keeper of secrets. But the game came down to a single spell, and I think it was a Foot of Gork, which was very powerful in those days and could stomp all over your list. And Jeff had set it up that the turn after he was going in. Everything was going in, and at that point it would be game. And John had this one magic phase where if he could get this Foot of Gork off, it was going to turn the tide. So this was back in the days of the Power Dice arms race, if you remember that. So I think it was 6th edition for that.
You had your pool.
You had your pool of dice. John had saved 5 dice for Foot of Gork, running the risk of that double one. Rolled the 5 dice, hit a 20. Even remember the number, hit a 20. And you must have had people 2 or 3 deep around this table. And everybody saw this 20 come out and went, oh my God, that was it. It was going to be stompy.
Yeah.
He was going to absolutely crush these very fragile demons. That was the thing, If you got the stomp on them, they were getting lifted off the board. And Jeff had only kept 4 dispel dice. I think it was the maximum he had. He just saved it for this one spell. And almost without even sort of looking, just with eyes locked on John, picked up the dice, chucked them in a pot, shook them round, dumped them down, lifted the pot off, and on 4 dice hit the 20. and that was the game on that one roll. And just because of the tension of the moment, I think. I mean, it was a great game to watch. I'd finished up early, and as you said, I used to love going and watching the top players play. So I'd finished up early, and I'd watched quite a lot of it. And John Dale was always a very cerebral player, deep thing. Had a bit of a reputation for playing slowly, but always, again, a gentleman of the game, really very, very thoughtful in terms of what he was doing on the tabletop. But just it all built up to that sort of single dice roll off, and that determined the winner. And Jeff then went on to win it the next year as well.
I don't think it comes across as well these days. I know I've stood around watching some games in the top tables, and people kind of don't enjoy it or don't like it as much as they used to. I think if you were top 3 tables in a GWGT back in the noughties or whatever we're going to call it, you had to expect 20 people.
Oh, yeah.
The staff would come out and start to kind of push you back.
Yeah, absolutely. It was pressure. Playing on the top table last game, you had 20, 30 people watching you, if not more, by the time the game was coming to a close.
Yeah. These games weren't streamed or anything like that. This was the only way you got to watch top level Warhammer, was by going and standing on the top tables and watching it.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was, I think, probably most memorable game I've seen. And I'll give another shout out to AD for the games that I've played in.
Cool. Right. The worst of times. Again, open to you, however you want to interpret it.
Yeah, and I think I'll keep it quick because there haven't been many worst of times. The period that probably leaps out to me was, I suppose, entirely self-inflicted, and it was basically the end of that glory. I think probably 15 years playing with the Warlords, and some of it was natural, some of it was people growing up and getting married and having kids. Mine at the time was some poor decision making in a relationship. I was married back then, or was getting married, and my other half at the time had certain expectations about where I would be at the weekends, and I think, I will share the blame equally. I don't think either of us was mature enough at the time to have the right conversations that we should have had. She was quite insistent that she expected me to give all of that up now that I was a grown married man. And instead of having a conversation about how important gaming was to me, how important the community was to me, as is sometimes my way, especially as a younger man, I sort of, shrugged my shoulders and tried to just, make other people happy. So there was a period there, and I think probably a 5 to 8 year period where I did very little wargaming, and it was a loss, and that marriage didn't last. I think maybe that was a minor indicator of why it didn't. When the days that I got back into gaming, I've stayed with it, and my current partner's very supportive of it, and understands that everybody needs an interest as long as you don't take that interest to an extreme.
Yes, for sure. It's one of life's big balances, getting relationships, hobbies, pastimes, and work right, especially when you've got families that are grown up. And so it is something difficult to manage. Right. Now, the fun part for you, Dave.
The part where you have to work out which stories you can tell.
Yeah, I mean, Keith didn't do the best here. Let's just be honest. I do think Keith is one of the straighter warlords. He's like, he was a lot more all game. Yeah, he was out there for the fun and stuff like that, and he was probably around for all of the shenanigans, but he wasn't one of the naughty boys, was he?
He was. Keith did like to get to bed. There was, he wanted to win. He had, and that's, to be honest,
He says otherwise, but we know.
that's why Keith's trophy cabinet has probably had to be emptied 3 or 4 times over, and he's got all the gold medals because he was focused.
Yeah, he's not been kicked out of Rock City as many times as us.
Or walking home with a dislocated knee, which was me one night. No, Jeff. Jeff dislocated his knee in there. Yeah, Keith was focused. Keith wanted to win. That was when he went to a tournament. That was his goal. He wanted to go home with silverware, and he was incredibly successful at it.
He was. And can you beat his success, though? Can you name? I'm not allowing Britcon because that's the one at Loughborough that I forgot last time.
Oh, I think I've chucked a couple in the chat. I've got a few for you, though.
Yeah.
So,
Can you name more tournaments from back in the day?
the Bristol Brawl.
Yes, that was the Troll Slayers one.
Yeah. No, that was the Bristol Big Uns, mate. That was Dave
All
G.
right. Okay.
Dave G and the Bristol Big Uns and all of them. The South Coast GT. He did Weymouth War, he did Pompey Pillage, he did Ribble Rumble. I thought of a few of these. BritCon was the one at Loughborough.
Yeah.
There was Worlds, which was at Derby.
Derby Worlds, yes.
Yeah. Oh, what was the... there was one in York Way that I can't remember.
Oh, was it the race course?
Yes. I can't. There was one up in York. We've said Sheffield Slaughter, but there was also a Mansfield tournament as well. Mansfield Mall.
Mansfield Mall, yes, that's
Mansfield Mall. So that's, I think I'm up to 10 there already. Obviously, you had all the Games Workshop stuff in Nottingham, which was a regular thing because we'd go for the GT, we'd go for the Club Challenge, we'd go for all of those different things as well.
Yeah. Was the Derby one? Was it Derby Destruction or?
Yeah. It was definitely Worlds at Derby, but you're right, there was another one in Derby as well.
It came later because it was I'm sure the two Bens ran it.
Yeah. And there was another London one that slipped my mind. But I think those were the real big ones. And then, like you say, Toy Soldier, which was Preston.
Yeah.
Don't
You've done better than Keith there.
Yes. And to be fair, I've cheated because I've
because you've had time to think about it.
Days to think about it.
All right then. To finish off, tell me your maybe top 3.
Again, none of these are ones that could get anybody in trouble, but I will avoid names just in case. One of them is a very quick one, but it was just the start of a nickname that never went away, and it was again, I won't mention the gamer's name, but he was XY the Birdman ever since this incident. And it was the early years of Toy Soldier. The actual tournament was played in a church.
Yes.
And as you came out of the church to go
the graveyard.
Yeah. And at the edge of the graveyard, there was a hedge. Reasonably short hedge. Let's say it was 2 to 2.5 feet tall.
Just before you go on, because I know this story very well, because I was the person chasing him, should I say.
Right.
But I'll let you continue on.
As we are heading back at the end of a day, back over to the Ship Inn for some drinks, we've come out of the church and everyone's strolling down. And yeah, the gentleman in question came herring out of the church at serious speed. And he was a young man and quite an athletic young man, being pursued by yourself. And even in those days, Sib, you probably would admit you were never going to catch him.
No, and to be honest, how this had happened was I stupidly said, "Sorry, last one to the ship buys the pints."
Right, right. And I think even if we'd put you in trainers and sporting gear on a running track and made him carry another person, he still probably could have outrun you back
Yeah,
in those
he,
days.
he was winning easy.
He was a lithe, fit young man, and he decided to take a shortcut to the pub.
Hmm.
So running down through the graveyard, he had an eye on this hedge, and he thought, I can make it over that.
Fuzz
Dead
boot
easy.
flops it.
just just dead easy. What he hadn't realised is the whole establishment was built on quite the slope.
Yeah,
So if he went over the hedge here, on the other side of the hedge was at least a 4 or 5 foot wall, which the hedge was perched on top of.
I think it was close to a 10 to 12 foot drop.
Well, hedge plus wall
Yeah,
all the way down was a big drop. It was a significant drop. So he launched himself into the air. He went flying over this hedge and then realised the drop on the other side, landed awkwardly, twisted his ankle. But I think my favourite part of this story isn't actually the Birdman, and that nickname
what happened next?
is what happened next over in the pub. So having done this, having gone flying over the wall, having landed, having twisted his ankle, we all end up in the pub over the road, and he's taken his shoe off because he's twisted his ankle. So and he's sat there, and everyone's laughing, and the Birdman nickname has already come out. And I think it was Jeff Porritt. I
It
can't
was.
remember. Okay, Jeff Porritt, the young mischief maker that he was back in those days, has seen a further opportunity for comedy were he to steal this trainer that has been removed. So the Birdman is sat there with his foot up with a pint in his hand, laughing, taking it all very well. And then Jeff whips the trainer off the table, launches himself out the front door of the pub, and hoiks this trainer out across the road in the front of the pub. And again, we're all finding this quite amusing. And poor old Birdman has now got to hobble himself out the front door of the pub to go and rescue his trainer. What Jeff hasn't noticed, because he's gone out there and just hoyed this trainer and then turned round and walked back into the applause of the room, is that at the end of this trainer's arc of descent, it's bounced off the cop car that's parked across the street and has landed and is now being held in the hand of a pretty disgruntled Bobby, as poor old Birdman has got to hop across there and explain A, why his trainer has been launched 20 foot across the street, but more importantly, why it's been launched in quite an aggressive manner at the local constabulary.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I always remember that because I won the race to the pub
Yes. Yeah,
and didn't have to buy the pints.
Stephen left him there to hop across the road whilst
Yep.
you made it for the pub
Waved at him as I went past.
with absolute joy.
Yeah, that is always remembered as the classic rabbit and the hare story. I honestly don't think the lad would mind, but he is a big miss from the gaming circuit. He did come to War Machine with us,
Yeah.
but he hasn't come back. I have spoke to him, did say that it wasn't a never, but he's got other things on,
Yeah.
and might be back at some point.
Absolutely cracking bloke.
Yeah.
Absolutely cracking bloke. So, yeah,
What's
that's
your second? So tell me another one of these. I think when we were doing the preamble, you mentioned you wanted to complete the story that Keith started about the eating challenge.
Yeah, well, and there were lots of eating challenges. So I think there's two. We'll do a quick one first, and then I'll finish with the eating challenge one. And again, the best stories, I think, unfortunately, are going to have to stay off the air. One of my favourite memories was always the arrival to tournaments. There was a little bit of arrogance in it, but there was always the classic line. There was always somebody who said on the Saturday morning, what time does the tournament start? To which the standard answer from somebody in the group was always, when we get there.
Yeah.
And there was the last minute rush to McDonald's. There was the rolling into the room 2 minutes before the first game started. The entrances became more and more elaborate over time. and I can't remember what tournament it was, but I did enjoy. There was one tournament in particular where I feel like it was Brendan had bought a proper 1980s ghetto blaster with him, and Brendan, being whatever he was, 7'2" tall, was walking into the room with a giant 80s ghetto blaster on his shoulder, playing NWA Fuck the Police, as we all just strolled in with 2 minutes to go, full Northern Warlords regalia, absolutely stinking of booze from the Friday night before. I did enjoy the arrivals at tournaments. They, like I say, they did get more and more elaborate with various different bits of music playing.
Yeah.
But no, the
Staggering statistic about Brendan.
go on.
His arm from
Yeah.
here to here was 16 inches. And you know what army he played?
Go on.
Bretonians, who had a...
I can see where this is going.
Yeah. He was always, can I make this charge?
You know what?
He
I've
was
heard
naughty boy.
there are some other staggering statistics about Brendan that I'm sure he could measure with as well. He was a tall lad, 6'8", I think he was. Actually, in
Yeah,
reality,
he didn't fit in them GW seats very well.
He did not. He did not. No. So Keith brought up the eating competitions, and the eating competitions were legendary. They were a Christmas tradition, and they were a lot of fun. And there was, like, you know, as he said, there was the slices of pizza, and he missed the key detail out of that one. And Brendan was the champion, but the key detail out of that particular one was the manner of victory. That one didn't have the Swiss roll off in it. They'd gone slice for slice up to and it was definitely this 23, 24 slices. And I believe it was Brendan and Daz Burnett.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Brendan just looks Daz in the eyes, picks up one slice,
Yeah.
picks up another slice,
Puts them together,
sandwiches them, and does them both at once. And Daz was just a broken man. He could not believe what he'd witnessed.
he was actually sweating.
And there were so many of them. Now, were you there for the triple trouble off? So we're in a Beefeater in Nottingham, and they used to do a dessert for 2 people called the triple
Christ.
trouble. Ah, you see, now it's coming back, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you had 4 of them lined up, and Boney was one of the 4.
Oh, this was...
Oh, this was there were people in the restaurant coming over to watch, and we had them lined up on like a top table, didn't we? Like it was some sort of wedding, and we had 4 triple trouble. It's gone. 4 triple troubles side by side, right? And it came with that really long spoon, really long, thin spoon, so you could hit the bottom of it.
Yeah.
So everyone started off reasonably sensibly, and then Boney pulls the false teeth out, dumps them to one side, gets 2 spoons, and starts threshing it into his mouth. It's literally like some sort of combine harvester until he's got his face in the bowl and he's just jackhammering it in. And how Keith missed these when he was talking about the eating
Yeah,
challenge.
because he even had the someone put like the cloche lid on his head or something like that. He was just shivering. He'd be the brain freeze off the ice cream and got to him. That was Boney Brendan.
Boney, Brendan, Tris could Max and Tris could always eat more than you thought.
Yeah,
Tris
he was
always up there in the eating contests. But my memory of that was there was a waitress who basically when Boney took his false teeth out and put them down, ran out the back to be sick. I think she was just horrified by this because he just pulled out this full set of false teeth. And then there were the other restaurant guests who were just sat there looking over, most of them falling off their seats laughing. Because it was ridiculous. But of all of the eating competitions, the very, very best one,
We're going back to Hartlepool, aren't we?
We're going back to Hartlepool. And I think, you know what? I think I'm going to use a name for this one. Can we? Because he genuinely isn't going to mind.
He's a great mate of yours.
He is probably my closest friend in the whole world. He genuinely isn't going to mind.
And I'm pretty sure he found it funny afterwards as well.
Oh, he
Hartlepool didn't, but he did.
He tells the story himself. So, yeah, probably my best mate in the whole world. We've gone to the Chinese... We've been banned from the Pizza Hut by this point.
Yeah,
so
because we ate too much.
Yeah, we've been banned from the Pizza Hut. So we're at an all-you-can-eat Chinese banquet.
Yeah.
And his name's come up many times. Kev, who, sizable fella at this point, always a contender in the eating championship. But this year, he hadn't really lasted through. And he'd become the de facto judge on measuring the plates. I think this got mentioned already. Yeah. So he had to approve the plate that you were eating. And God knows, this was the Swiss roll-off year. I think it was another Brendan win, but I think this time it was...
Brendan and Tristan and Brendan win.
no drinks allowed. Just how many Swiss roll-offs could you do? And this has all been a lot of fun. And Brendan's won again, and it's time to leave. And I'm in a car with Kev. And back at this point, he had quite a flash little what was the sort of Nissan sports car, very low to the ground.
NX200s, I want to say, but
he had quite a flash Toyota or Nissan sports car. It wasn't particularly expensive, but it
wasn't the one that Jeff ran over, was it?
No, it wasn't. That was a 308, I think. Yeah, but he had this quite flash, quite low to the ground car. So we come out and we go to get in the car, and it's bucket seats, and you've got to get all the way down to it. And Kev's wearing his traditional bright neon orange combat pants that for some reason became his calling card at tournaments. So he's got these plastic orange pants on, and he hadn't invested in a new pair, so they were a little bit tight around the middle. So he's got in the car, and the very first thing he's done is belts come off, pants have got unbuttoned, zips down, fully let himself into a position of comfort.
Because let's face it, when you've left the restaurant, you've ate a bit too much. It's what you do, isn't it? You get in the car, the belt comes off.
Privacy of your own car, and he's backed the car out, and he's gone to drive out the car park, and we've made it all of 10 yards, and something has disagreed with Mr. Horseman at this point. Some sort of rumbling has gone on. So he's slapped on the handbrake. He is now blocking the entire car park. Nobody can get out past him. Thrown the door open to this very low to the ground sports car, basically crawled out on his knees because he's a big man and it's a long way to get up. To help him back to his feet, he's hauled himself up the glass front of the all-you-can-eat restaurant.
Yep.
So you've now got, and this was I think a Saturday lunchtime, a Sunday lunchtime.
Yeah, it was normally done on a Saturday.
Oh, it was busy. So you've got a packed full all-you-can-eat Chinese on a Saturday lunchtime in Hartlepool, all trying to enjoy their very tasty buffet. And there's a banging on the window as a big man hauls himself up the window. And that would have been fine. That would have all been okay. But the problem was, as we previously mentioned, he'd undone his pants. So as he's hauling himself up the window, these pants are slipping lower and lower and lower down his legs. But because he's in so much pain from whatever is disagreeing with him, the instinct to pull the pants back up is overtaken by the instinct to throw up.
Yeah.
So he starts projectile vomiting down
the window.
And he stood there with one hand on the glass like this. The full Chinese banquet coming out like this. The pants have now fallen all the way down. The pants are now on the floor. So he's there in his boxers, throwing up, sweating.
And then my favourite bit comes.
I'm not sure what there was after this, but didn't some woman go out there and start beating on him?
There wasn't even someone from the restaurant. An old woman walked down the road and started hitting him with a fucking stick.
That was it. I'd forgotten that bit. So he's throwing up, his pants around his ankle. Everyone in the restaurant is staring at him, absolutely disgusted at this behaviour. I'm sat in the car, I can't move, I'm laughing so hard. And you're right, some old woman walking down the road just starts twatting him with a handbag. And that, I think, of all of the story, and it's probably the most family friendly, but that picture of him in that position at that moment in time is just crystallized into my mind.
Yeah, I mean, I always remember that one because it was the first year I ever brought my son.
Oh,
my son absolutely I mean, I think he was only maybe 9 or 10 at the time. I absolutely loved playing Starship Tiddlywinks with Brendan and all there. I mean, I had a great time, and then he had to watch that.
It was a disgrace, but it was an amusing disgrace.
So I think we'd come out car in front of you and then stopped to see why Max had stopped, and obviously witnessed all of this from the side of the road. But yeah, absolute classic. And he's had a reminder of it many times down
there. I think that story comes up every time he walks out the house to a tournament.
Yeah. Well, Dave, we have done the longest call so far, so I am going to take time to thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
For obviously
thank you for
coming
having
on.
me.
I hope very much to see you in person shortly. As you know, I'm probably coming down there for my boot camp, so maybe catch you then.
Yeah. Well, we'll be up at Keith. So I think Mark has already said that he's got space for 2 tables at his. At which point that we'll all be around there.
Yep. I think all that is left to do is to say thank you very much, Dave. It's been a pleasure. And as I say, when I've done the first run, I'm hoping to get people back on to maybe start chatting about different topics and different things. So it'll be great to have you back when I get the chance.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you.
No bother. Well, thank you for your time, and we will catch you later. So that was an absolute amazing catch up with Dave. I honestly haven't seen him in about 15 years, so it was great to catch up with what he's been doing, to find out a little bit more about him. Some of them questions I'd never asked him. I hope you have enjoyed it. I'm going to ask you one more time just to like and subscribe and to leave any comments now that you've seen the video. It certainly was a trip down memory lane. If you do want to help out with the cost of the show, you can do so by using the Giving Ground Buy Me a Coffee link. That's not necessary, however. I'd much rather prefer some comments left, just so me and Dave can have a read back and see what other people thought. For now, however, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next episode.